Hello everyone, a very good morning and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep. Welcome to the daily Hindu News Analysis. So before we begin the discussion of today's the Hindu newspaper, we have an important announcement. Today, that is the 3rd of September, we shall be conducting a special interactive workshop exclusively on the BYJU'S Exam Prep app. The workshop will be conducted by Sarmad sir today at 6 p.m. and it will help you understand how to prepare for the upcoming UPSC Civil Services Examination and how to crack the exam in your first attempt. So do attend the workshop without fail, and the link for registration is provided in the description box below. With this, let's begin with the analysis of today's the Hindu newspaper. See, I have always told you that the Sunday newspaper is very interesting. If you go through the newspaper, initially you might feel that you don't have many articles in the Sunday edition of the Hindu. But a careful examination will show that there are many topics that are relevant for the exam, and we can go a little in detail so that we can still make use of the newspaper to cover key topics for prelims and mains. Today we may not have detailed editorials and columns, but still there are many relevant articles, and I would like to take up 4 articles for a detailed discussion. Apart from that, I have chosen 6 more articles that are relevant for the prelims. So in total, we shall cover 10 topics from the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper. So let's take up the first article, which deals with Aditya L1 mission that successfully lifted off yesterday from Sriharikota. ISRO has seen back-to-back success following its Chandrayaan 3 mission. After successfully deploying the Vikram lander on the lunar surface, within days of it, ISRO has successfully launched India's first space-based observatory mission, which is focused on the sun. So Aditya L1 mission is of great pride for India because this mission has a number of unique salient features. We need to understand the trajectory that the spacecraft will be taking. We should understand the mission objective, and these points could be relevant for mains and even for possible prelims questions. So as you know, ISRO's PSLV, the Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle, which has become a reliable workhorse of the ISRO, was used for the mission to place Aditya L1 in the intended orbit. The PSLV, which is a 3-stage launch vehicle, has become a cheap and reliable option for ISRO to launch satellites and spacecrafts into a low Earth orbit. PSLV is also used with strap-on motors to place it at a higher orbit, and it's become a preferred launch vehicle for launching foreign satellites as well, for foreign vendors. So in that regard, PSLV has established its credibility many times over and over again, and it has delivered again with the Aditya L1 mission. Now Aditya L1 spacecraft, it has been injected in a Earth orbit as of now, where the spacecraft will remain for the next 16 days. For the next 16 days, it will remain in an orbit around the Earth, and slowly and gradually, ISRO will conduct orbit raising maneuvers by firing the thrusters which are on board the spacecraft. So very similar to the Chandrayaan, Mangalyaan missions, the orbit will be slowly raised by firing the onboard thruster at the perigee point, that is when the spacecraft is at the closest point to the Earth, which gives it more velocity to eventually escape Earth's gravitational pull. And finally, after 16 days, Aditya L1 will be inserted into a trans-Lagrangian path. It will be placed into this path towards the sun. It's called the trans-Lagrangian insertion. The focus here is to insert the spacecraft eventually at this point known as L1 or Lagrange point 1, which is a very key location between the sun and the earth. So the spacecraft will be specifically deployed at L1, at Lagrange point 1, and to carry out this insertion, it will be put on a path towards this Lagrange point by specifically raising its orbit. And this journey will take another 110 days. The spacecraft will be on a 110-day journey in the trans-Lagrangian insertion. So in total, it will take more than 120 days, close to 125 days, to bring the spacecraft at the desired point. So this is going to be a very long mission. It will take a good 4 months for the spacecraft to be raised in its orbit, inserted into trans-Lagrangian insertion point, and then finally be placed at L1, which is the final destination of Aditya L1. Now, why is this unique trajectory being taken? That is what we should understand. Finally, when the spacecraft is placed here in a halo orbit, right, the spacecraft will have constant vision or focus towards the sun. It will help in making key observations regarding solar activity. But why specifically choose this point? That is the question, right? And what is so special about this point known as L1? So for this, you should understand what is a Lagrange point. Lagrange point, they are those positions in space where the gravitational pull between two large objects effectively cancels out each other. Now, if you take Sun and the Earth, for example, these are two large objects in space, and there would be certain points between them where the massive gravitational pull of the Sun and the Earth effectively cancels out. And if you were to place any small object at this specific point, if you precisely insert a small object here, it will basically remain in perpetual motion. You can establish a precise centripetal force. The two large masses, right, they provide for a precise centripetal force here that will drive this small object that you place into an orbit, and the object will not tend to move. It will not be pulled towards either of the bodies. It will maintain a perpetual constant position, and it also helps in reducing fuel consumption, right? It helps in reducing fuel consumption for the spacecraft, and it will remain in position constantly under the influence of the gravitational force of both the objects. So such a point is called a Lagrange point, where the gravitational pull between two large objects in space effectively cancels out and it precisely equals the centripetal force required for this small object placed here to remain in that position permanently. Is that clear? So that is the advantage of placing a spacecraft at a Lagrange point. With minimal fuel, you can ensure that the spacecraft remains in that exact same position, giving you the best possible observation point. So with regard to the Sun and the Earth, there are 5 Lagrange points. You can see that in this image over here. You have L1, L2, L3, L4 and L5. There are 5 such Lagrange points between Sun and the Earth. This is the Sun here. This is the Earth. You can also see the Moon as well over here. So between Sun and the Earth, there are 5 such Lagrange points, and space agencies, they have been making use of some of these Lagrange points to strategically position few spacecrafts. So ISRO is also having a similar vision for Aditya L1 mission. That's why the mission is named as Aditya L1. L1 refers to the position where the spacecraft will be stationed. It will be stationed at Lagrange point 1. Now this concept was developed by Italian-French mathematician Joseph-Louis Lagrange. It's named after him. He solved this mathematical problem and proved that such points exist in space where between two large celestial objects, the gravitational pull effectively cancels out at these points, and they are named as Lagrange points. So between Sun and the Earth, we have these 5 points. Out of them, L1, L2 and L3, they are a little unstable points. They lie along the axis of the Sun and the Earth. If you were to draw a line, a straight line connecting Sun and the Earth, right? So along this straight line, you have 3 of these points, which is L1, L2 and L3. These are a relatively unstable points when you place a spacecraft here, right? It will still need some correction along these points which are present on the straight line between sun and the earth. If you were to place an object or a spacecraft, they will undergo slight disturbance every few weeks. So to maintain the correct position, you need small corrections to be done by firing the onboard thrusters once in a while. But still the fuel consumption will be very less. You can place these objects for many, many years with minimal effort. Is that clear? Whereas the other two Lagrange points, L4 and L5, that are located along the vertices of these equilateral triangles that you see, these positions are more stable. If you were to station an object here at L4 or L5, they will maintain more stability and they will require very minimal corrections in their orbital path. Is that clear? But still, space agencies largely prefer to station spacecrafts at L1 or L2 depending on the mission profile. Now, for example, let's say India's mission Aditya L1, the focus is to study the sun, to understand solar flares, coronal mass injection, etc. So we need a constant line of sight towards the sun. The spacecraft should be facing towards the sun. So in such missions, L1 is preferred. This is the perfect point for such a spacecraft. In fact, even NASA has deployed the SOHO spacecraft, Solar Heliospheric Observatory Satellite, at the L1 point. Because an object here will maintain constant line of sight towards the sun. At the same time, it is close enough to Earth to maintain communication, and it's far away from the sun's extreme heat and solar weather, right, which won't affect the functioning of the spacecraft as well. So this makes it an ideal point, and it doesn't suffer from any eclipse or occultation. Since it's placed away from the Earth and the moon, right, there won't be any eclipse or occultation occurring, thereby providing constant line of sight towards the sun, while maintaining effective communication with the Earth to send and relay the data back. So for solar observation, L1 is the most preferred point. But let's say if a mission has to focus on deeper space, if a mission has to look the other way away from the sun, then the perfect point for positioning such spacecrafts would be L2. This is where multiple missions have been deployed by NASA and European Space Agency. For example, L2 has been preferred for the Planck Observatory of the European Space Agency. Even the WMAP spacecraft of NASA has been positioned here, and the most high-profile space mission of recent times, the James Webb Space Telescope, is also placed at the L2 Lagrange point. What is special about L2 Lagrange point is that it is placed away from the Earth and the moon. It's almost in the exact same line of the sun, Earth and the moon, and placed away. So if you have to look away from the sun, right, especially to look at deeper space and capture good images, then L2 is the perfect point. At this position, the spacecraft is shielded from all the adverse conditions in space, right, from the adverse heat and space weather conditions. At the same time, it is close enough to maintain constant communication with the Earth. And the position is perfect for charging the solar panels as well. Solar panels can be turned the other side towards the sun to generate power for the spacecraft, whereas the payloads can look the other way. So they don't get blinded by sun's light, and they can look the other way with greater clarity towards outer space and capture the required data, including high resolution pictures like James Webb Space Telescope is currently doing. So for such missions where you need to look away from the sun, L2 Lagrange point is the most preferred, whereas for solar observation, observing the sun, L1 becomes the most preferred stationing point. The L3 on the other hand, which is behind the sun, it's hidden from our view because the sun's light blinds us to L3. So L3 is of not much use. Space agencies as of now, they haven't found an application for L3, because if you were to station something here, which is by the way very, very far away, right, it won't be much, it won't be of much use, as it is way off for as far as communication with Earth is concerned, and also it is hidden by the blinding light and heat of the sun. So L3 doesn't have much of an application. L4 and L5 also have not been used as of now, but they are more stable positions. But again, a a required application has to be developed for that. Is that clear? So as of now, L1 is the most preferred for observing the sun, and that is exactly where Aditya L1 is headed. So please understand the concept of Lagrange points. Understand the usage of L1 and L2 and which missions are placed at L1 and L2. Now coming to the last point of discussion here, what exactly is the mission profile of Aditya L1? This spacecraft is carrying 7 important payloads that are listed over here. It has a emission line coronagraph, a solar ultraviolet imaging telescope, an X-ray spectrometer. It has digital magnetometers. It has a wind particle experiment module. So these payloads will help us study coronal heating and as well as coronal mass ejection. It will give us better insight into solar activity and to better understand the nuclear reaction, the nuclear fusion that takes place in the sun. It helps us understand the transfer of heat taking place from the core to the outer layers of the sun towards the photosphere. It helps us understand the ejections that happen at the corona layer and the flares, which we call as solar flares, that influence space weather. Because these solar storms or solar flares, they can have a huge impact on the Earth, on life on Earth itself, right? On Earth's magnetic field, the atmosphere and the satellites in orbit, power transmission and communication on the ground, and in general life on Earth. Everything is vulnerable to space weather and solar flares. So studying them would be of immense value for scientists and physicists, and it could also give us a lot of answers regarding the very origin of the universe as well. So these studies will be conducted by Aditya L1, and the mission has a 5-year timeline, and the spacecraft is expected to fetch valuable data for scientists and physicists, not just in India but around the world. So this is one of the most high-profile missions that ISRO has carried out, and one should hope that ISRO will place the spacecraft at the intended position at L1 and help the scientific community to better understand the sun and the solar phenomena. So moving on, let's look at the next article from page number 10 that deals with micro irrigation in the country. I feel it's a very important article with regard to Indian agriculture and economy. Micro irrigation plays a key role in our country because in India, most of the farmers are small and marginal farmers. They own very small parcels of land, usually less than 2 acres of land. So small marginal farmers in the country, they largely depend on micro irrigation. Micro irrigation refers to privately owned irrigation. For example, bore wells, tube wells, ponds and deep wells that are dug. So essentially, water sources from groundwater table and some surface water sources as well. They constitute micro irrigation as far as agriculture is concerned. See, the irrigation that is facilitated through the government, that is through dams, canals, etc., right? That would fall under watershed management, where the entire drainage basins are being managed through the government authorities and large-scale water supplies being arranged for agricultural activities. But at a micro level, at the level of villages, at the level of each farm, the irrigation which is arranged by farmers themselves is referred to as micro irrigation. So irrigation through few groundwater and surface water sources that is provided for by using bore wells, tube wells, ponds, deep wells, etc., right? That is referred to as micro irrigation. Now obviously, to supply the water here, the farmers will depend on pumps to push the water towards the intended areas, right? Water pumps have to be used, and powering the water pump requires energy, correct? Whereas in case of large dams and irrigation canals, by leveraging the topography and the force of gravity, water can be allowed to flow. But in case of micro irrigation, you need water pumps to pump out the water and channel them towards the intended area, and this requires energy source. You need to power the water pump. So this article gives you a great insight into micro irrigation in India and what are the power sources with regard to pumping water as far as micro irrigation is concerned. This article is entirely based on the findings of the minor irrigation census, which is carried out by the Ministry of Jal Shakti. Recently, the sixth edition of minor irrigation census was published by the Jal Shakti Ministry, and it presents a number of valuable points and findings that gives us insight into Indian agriculture and into irrigation in the country. One of the major findings of the report is that almost 3/4 of the minor irrigation sources, they are powered by electricity. They are powered by electricity. Is that clear? Electricity is the dominant source to extract water as far as minor irrigation, micro irrigation is concerned. Now, please understand that this report is presenting us retrospective data, older data, because the sixth edition that was published just a few weeks back, it was published almost 1 month ago. It collects, its data is related to 2017-18. The data is almost 5 to 6 years old. The reason why there is a time lag is because to collect such micro level data at the level of each village and each farm, it takes a lot of time to collect and compute the data and then present the data. That is why there is a time lag. So whatever we will study right now, it's not the present state of minor irrigation in India. The data is related to 2017-18. The findings are being published now because it takes a lot of time to collect the data and analyze minor irrigation data. Now let me take you through some of the key findings and let us draw some assessments from that. The report gives us insight into the type of groundwater extraction in the country. At what depth are we extracting groundwater? What is the stress on the groundwater table? Can be inferred by looking at these findings. See, if you have to extract water from the groundwater table, obviously you need water pumps that are powered with electricity, right? So we dig bore wells, tube wells and deep wells at various depths to extract water from the underground aquifers. So according to the report, dug wells or ponds which extract water from a maximum depth of just 15 meters, they remain the dominant source of groundwater in the country. It's a very important fact. Please remember that. Dominant source of groundwater in the country comes from dug wells and ponds which extract water at a lower depth from just around 15 meters. And according to the census, these dug wells or ponds have declined as a total number, right? It has declined from 87 lakh to 82 lakh compared to the data of the 5th edition. So there is a decline in the usage of dug wells and ponds. What does it indicate? It indicates that probably we have exhausted this water resource. There is a over exploitation happening. So at higher depths you are not finding enough water. So farmers are forced to dig deeper into the earth to find reliable water source. Next comes your shallow tube wells where water is extracted from around 35 meters, a maximum depth of 35 meters. Even this share has declined. The share of shallow tube wells also has gone down. Whereas medium-sized wells and deep wells which extract groundwater from 70 meters and more than 70 meters, this has increased considerably. So it means our farmers are digging deeper and deeper to extract groundwater. So what can you infer from this? One inference is that we are putting too much stress on the groundwater table. We are over exploiting the groundwater table. So as a result, groundwater availability is getting exhausted at the higher depths. So at lower depths, we are reaching out to the lower depths to extract groundwater, which means you need more power. You need more electricity to extract this water from the bottom and to supply for irrigation, which means your power requirement, your electricity requirement will increase. and it also points towards an environmental disaster. Because when you start going deeper and deeper, water can be contaminated with a number of toxic elements, including arsenic and the others, and even heavy metals sometimes, right? It also indicates the water stress in Indian agriculture, right? How farmers rely heavily on either monsoons or groundwater table, and how India's agrarian sector is very constrained by the limited water supply in the country. So that is a key insight that you can draw from this. The report itself does not draw this conclusion. Please remember, the report, the census, is not saying anything about the causes for these trends, but based on analysis, we can draw this insight and inference. And let's say there is a question, you can present this insight and you can present this as your inference from this data. Next, the census also talks about the spread of minor irrigation schemes in the country. See, groundwater distribution across India, it varies from state to state and region to region. So several state governments, they give a lot of support to farmers to invest in minor irrigation schemes. Since agriculture is a key subject, right, and water also is a key state subject, it's also a major electoral issue as well, right? Providing the required facilities to farmers with regard to agriculture and water supply is a major electoral issue as well in the rural constituencies. So state governments, which have a strong motivation to help the farmers, they give a lot of incentives. They give them subsidized loans, easy access to credit, so that they can purchase the tube wells, which can be quite expensive. And there are millions and millions of such schemes in the country. Various state governments, collectively, they are running millions of schemes in India to incentivize and support and subsidize the farmers, so they can rely on tube wells and pump wells, which they can use for minor irrigation. So according to the census, there is a lower growth in electrification. There is a lower growth in electrification as compared to data from previous editions. See, I told you earlier that almost 3/4 of the water pumps in minor irrigation are powered through electricity. Correct? This is the finding of the 6th edition. That is around 76% of the water sources are electrified. But compared to 4th and 5th edition, the percentage growth, the relative growth has declined. That is, the reliance on grid electricity for pumping water has gone down, which indicates that the government has succeeded in promoting energy efficient water extraction. Better pumps with better energy ratings are being used. And we are not just relying on grid electricity, we are also pushing the farmers to diversify and rely on solar and wind power to make this water extraction more sustainable. Right? There is a shift that you can notice from the data, that farmers are not just relying on grid electricity. There is an increase in solar plants and wind plants at farm level, which is powering these water pumps. So you see a lower growth in electrification in the 6th edition data compared to previous editions. In total, there are 23.14 million minor irrigation schemes across the 695 districts of the country. Is that clear? Out of these schemes that state governments are providing to incentivize farmers with regard to minor irrigation, majority of them, almost 95% of them, are for groundwater extraction. Whereas just 5.2% of it is for surface water extraction. This again highlights our over dependency on groundwater table. With regard to minor irrigation, groundwater table is critical. Almost 95% of the government schemes, right? Almost 21.93 million schemes, they are focused on groundwater extraction. Whereas just around 5.2% is for surface water extraction. Now, what about the state-wise distribution of these schemes? Which states are leading in groundwater extraction? Which states are more focused on surface water extraction with regard to minor irrigation? This data could be relevant for your prelims as well. So, according to the minor irrigation census, the 6th edition of it, Uttar Pradesh is the leading state with regard to minor irrigation schemes. Almost 17.2% of the schemes that we mentioned, they are from the UP government. This is followed by Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh and Tamil Nadu. Now, if you further break down this data, you will see that with regard to groundwater related schemes, the leading states are UP, Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, Tamil Nadu and Telangana. It indicates that these states have a higher dependency on groundwater for agriculture. Whereas when it comes to surface water extraction, the highest share is in Maharashtra, followed by Karnataka, Telangana, Odisha and Jharkhand. Alright, so roughly remember the data, and please note that minor irrigation schemes have increased by about 1.42 million compared to the 5th and 6th edition data. Is that clear? The census also clearly shows that it is the small marginal farmers in the country who own very small parcels of land, right? They own hardly 1 acre, 2 acres of land. They are the ones who have a greater dependency on minor irrigation. They are the ones who are depending more on the groundwater table, which highlights their vulnerability as well, right? So these are the key insights you draw with regard to Indian agriculture and Indian economy. And I feel you can use this data and these insights in your mains answer. You can even expect a very broad generic prelims question as well based on the minor irrigation census. So with this, let's proceed to the next topic. It's a very interesting topic. From page number 10, we have a topic related to the Tamil community that is interestingly found in Myanmar and also in Manipur. Now, will you believe me if I tell you that there are thousands of Tamilians found in Myanmar and Manipur, right? It's quite interesting to know that. So this is related to history and as well as international relations, right? The topic is in news because in the recent flare-up in Manipur, in the latest ethnic clashes that happened, right? The Tamil business community in Manipur has been targeted. Armed insurgents from both the sides, from Kukis and Metis, right, who have been involved in the ethnic violence, they have threatened the Tamil business owners who are settled in Manipur near the Myanmar border, and they are extracting money from them. They levy this so-called tax on them, and if the Tamil owners and business owners, if they don't pay the amount, they'll be killed or their businesses will be destroyed. In the latest scale of violence that we have seen, in the cycle of violence, Kuki armed insurgents and even some Methi armed insurgents, they have targeted Tamil businesses, they have burned down several Tamil owned shops. They face a similar situation in Myanmar as well. Inside Myanmar, there is a strong Tamil community. At one point, it was a very large Tamil community. Today, the numbers have gone down because of all the security problems in the region. But in Myanmar as well, because of the political situation, the constant insurgent wars, then the constant military rule and the resultant violence has led to targeting of Tamil businessmen in Myanmar as well. So it's very interesting to understand how come the Tamil community moved and settled in this part of the world. What's the history behind it? I feel it's a very important topic, very relevant for international relations as far as India-Myanmar relations are concerned, and also relevant from a history and culture point of view, right? Because the Tamil community here, they are integral part of Manipur's culture. They have become an integral part of Myanmar's culture as well near these border areas. Some of you might have heard about a border town known as More, which is in Manipur. Along the Manipur-Myanmar border, there is an important commercial town called More. This place became a commercial center. It became a trading hub, largely because of the Tamil business community. You guys might have heard about a project known as IMT Trilateral Highway Project. It's a major connectivity project that India is pursuing with Myanmar and Thailand. It's a highway that will connect India, Myanmar and Thailand, which India is pursuing under Look East Act East policy. This critical highway, it starts from More in Manipur. It connects More in Manipur with key commercial centers in Myanmar. You can see that in the map as well. Roughly, More is located somewhere over here. So the IMT highway, which is constantly in news, it connects More with key places in Myanmar such as Mandalay, key commercial centers like Mandalay. Then you can see Yangon over here, formerly known as Rangoon. From here, the road will connect with Mesot in Thailand. It connects with Mesot in Thailand. This is the alignment of this highway, the IMT highway between India, Myanmar and Thailand. So there is a reason why the road is starting from Moreh, because Moreh is a major commercial trading center. Since many decades, it has been a trading point between India and Myanmar, between British India and Burma. Alright, so there's a very interesting history here. See, back in the colonial times, between India and China, this region, which is the Indo-China region, right, of the Mekong Delta region, this was strategically placed. You had the British India colony towards the Indian Ocean and the subcontinent, and China, which was another major source for raw materials for European colonial powers. So between these two large civilizations, between India and China, you have this region, the Indo-China region, also referred to as the Mekong Delta, that covers Myanmar, Vietnam, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia. All these countries are part of this Indo-China region. So during the colonial period, Indo-China region acquired a lot of significance because of its strategic location between India and China. So as colonial trade picked up, as colonial trade improved, and as the colonial powers, that is the British especially, and even the French, as they exploited resources from India and China, many important commercial centers came up in Indo-China. Especially Rangoon, which is today known as Yangon, became a major trading point and a commercial center. Alright? So the British needed workers to run the trade routes, to run the facilities, to maintain the trade links. So the British transported, the British East India Company in particular, they transported Indian workers to Burma, particularly to Rangoon. They picked up workers, laborers and even businessmen from the Madras province, Bengal province and the Punjab province. So several Tamilians, Bengalis, even the Telugu speakers, Odia speakers and Punjabi community as well, they were shifted by East India Company in the 19th century. They were settled in Burma and in the larger Indo-China region at important cities and commercial centers to work for the British enterprises. So the Tamil community gradually increased its strength. They mainly traveled through the sea route via Bay of Bengal. Bay of Bengal is a common connection between India and Myanmar. So from southern India, from the Madras province, the Tamil laborers and businessmen, they would travel through the sea route and they would reach Rangoon or Yangon, right? So this Tamil community would dominate the trading and the business entities here. And eventually in Myanmar, you saw the presence of a strong Tamil diaspora. Is that clear? So of course later, post-independence, both India, Myanmar, that is Burma, became independent. The British left. So the Tamilians, they stayed back. There are other communities as well, but they are in smaller numbers. You do find few Punjabis, Bengalis as well, but their numbers are relatively smaller. But the Tamil community became very strong, and at one point you had anywhere between 60,000 to 1 lakh Tamil people settled in this part of Myanmar near the borders with India as well, right? But in 1962, Myanmar descended into a military dictatorship. Myanmar's military took over, it threw out the elected civilian government, and military junta's rule, military dictatorship was established. So this began a hard time for the Tamil community. Because initially, Myanmar's military junta, they introduced the enterprise nationalization law in 1963, and they nationalized all the key industries and businesses. Major industries like leather, then other key businesses, right, in the manufacturing sector, they were all nationalized by Myanmar's military to take over all the manufacturing and resources in the country. So this destroyed the Tamil business community, and they were even threatened. And because of the law and order situation and the adverse economic situation, most of the Tamil businessmen had to leave the region. Myanmar even asked India to take the responsibility, and the then Lal Bahadur Shastri government started taking in Tamil refugees. Several ships were arranged by India to evacuate the Tamil community, and thousands of them were brought back. Several Tamil refugees came back from Myanmar because of the adverse political situation and economic situation, and they settled in Tamil Nadu. Alright, some of them moved across the border and they settled at More and in border areas in Manipur. Those who could not leave everything behind, right, some of them settled right at the border at More, and that is how More started becoming a major commercial center. Because see, when the Tamil community was asked to leave, they were initially allowed to take all their belongings. They could take all the gold, all the assets that they had. But later Myanmar's military junta realized if the Tamil businessmen are taking away everything, the country loses their resources. So they imposed a ban. They allowed the Tamil community to take only around 15 rupees worth of assets. Imagine that. They put a cap on the assets that they could carry back to India. So this forced Tamil community to settle near the border areas itself, near Manipur or More, because they would illegally cross over into India. If they try to legally cross over, they can't carry their assets. Myanmar's military would prevent them. Some refugees who feared for their lives, they came back. They came back to India, settled in Tamil Nadu. But several of them crossed illegally across into India and they settled at More, turning the place into a major commercial trading center. Is that clear? And over the decades, several of the Tamil refugees who were settled in Tamil Nadu, they started moving back. They started going back to Manipur. Right? You still find a small community in Myanmar as well, and you find a strong Tamil community in More in Manipur as well. So this community has become pretty influential. They did have relations with Kukis and Metis and Nagas of the region. These native ethnic tribes, right, ethnic communities, they have had linkages with the Tamil community in the region. You see a unique culture thriving here. I don't know if you guys have ever been to the region, but in More you will find street vendors selling idli, dosa. You have South Indian style temples in Manipur along the Myanmar border. So that is very interesting, very unique, and I feel it's a very important part of India-Myanmar relations. And also, given the current situation in Manipur, the topic could be relevant from a history and culture point of view. Right? Today, Tamil community is facing a threat because they are being threatened by Kuki armed insurgents and Methi insurgents. Even in the 70s and 80s, when insurgency in Manipur was at its peak, armed insurgent groups would threaten them and they have to pay these so-called taxes, or else their businesses and shops are attacked and burnt, and few Tamils are killed as well in the region. In Myanmar recently, 2 Tamil diaspora members were killed because of the violence that is taking place in Myanmar. So as a result, the topic is very much in news, and it's always better to be aware of these important facts. Next, on page 12, we have a small article on how artificial intelligence can improve diagnosis for tuberculosis by automating the scanning of X-rays. See, India has laid out a very ambitious target to eliminate tuberculosis. As you know, TB is an infectious disease caused by a bacteria, right? There is a global target. We have a UN Sustainable Development Goal target to eliminate TB by 2030. Alright? But India has set an ambitious target for itself to eliminate TB by 2025. That is 5 years before the UN target. So India is working towards the goal of ending TB by 2025. So to end TB, we need better diagnosis. You need to catch the disease, identify the prevalence of the disease. That is when you can provide the right treatment and save as many people as possible. According to National TB Prevalence Survey, nearly 43% of TB cases have been missed. They would have been missed without a chest X-ray. When it comes to TB diagnosis, along with sputum testing, right? X-ray is a critical diagnostic tool. Chest X-ray is critical to identify the infection and then start the course of treatment. In most cases, the infection has been detected through a chest X-ray, right? According to this data from the government, 43% cases would have been missed by the doctors if not for their analysis of chest X-rays. So this is where India-based startup, a Mumbai-based startup, has developed an AI platform that can automate the scanning of chest X-rays and detect for TB signs. It can confirm TB with a great accuracy by scanning the X-rays. The digital copies of the X-rays can be scanned through an AI algorithm, and this could reduce the time and improve diagnosis, which could help India to achieve the goal of eliminating TB by 2025. According to the article, this AI-based testing of chest X-rays has a sensitivity of more than 90% with a specificity of more than 70%, which means it's very accurate. So in majority of the cases, the AI tool will correctly identify tuberculosis infection just by scanning the digital X-rays. So this is an important tool that can be deployed in our fight against TB. So this completes all the mains related articles. Now let's proceed to talk about few prelims related articles. Let's take a quick look. Let's look at this article from page number 6 that refers to Operation Gaja that was carried out by the forest departments of Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu. See, in the Chittoor district near the popular temple town of Tirupati, right? That is where Andhra Pradesh shares a boundary with Tamil Nadu. You have dense forested areas including the major biosphere reserve. So you do have a decent elephant population in this forested region along the Andhra Pradesh Tamil Nadu border. Recently, a elephant bull, that is a male elephant, which was on mast, that is, it was on heat, right? Its testosterone levels will be very high, causing the elephant to go on a rampage. Usually the elephant herds, they cast out the elephants on mast, the bull elephants on mast are cast out by the herd. And these solitary elephants, they go on a rampage, destroying crops, sometimes even killing people, right? This represents a case of man-animal conflict. Again, the blame doesn't lie with the animal itself, right? The blame largely lies on human beings who have spread habitations into forested areas. So in the Chittoor region, along the Andhra-Tamil Nadu border, there was a recent case where a male elephant went on a massive rampage. It had killed a few people, destroyed crops, and it had become quite notorious. But the forest departments have safely rescued this elephant. They've trapped this elephant and brought it back into a contained habitat. So this process, right, helps you understand how effectively man-animal conflict can be managed. What is the threat to our animals because of increasing incidents of man-animal conflict? Because many times these stories don't have a good ending, right? This could happen with other endangered species as well, threatened species, be it tigers, leopards, etc. Usually the farmers, the people in rural areas, in the forested areas, they take matters into their own hands. They end up harming, hurting or killing the animal, right? But in this case, the forest department has done a fine job by using kumkis. Kumkis are trained elephants. They are professionals. They are trained by the forest department. They work with their mahouts, who are also specially trained in capturing the wild elephants. So kumkis are trained elephants that can calm down and bring down a bull elephant, and they can later tranquilize these elephants and bring them back to a habitat, right, where they can be safely released later. So usage of kumkis is a regular practice. Forest departments across South India especially, right, where these incidents keep happening due to increasing man-animal conflict incidents. They use kumki elephants, trained elephants, and the mahouts, they specialize in guiding the kumkis to calm down the bull elephant. And later, experts, veterinarians will tranquilize the elephant and it's brought into a conservation center. It's either introduced in a zoological park or it is released into the wild after a few days, right? So please be aware of the way in which man-animal conflicts are managed. So Operation Gaja in Andhra Pradesh is one example, right, where you can successfully, without causing harm to the animal, you can try to restrict the damage to the forested areas, right? You can restrict damage to the local people as well, while protecting the biodiversity. These incidents, they're increasing, even in Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, in Kerala, right, across the Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve. Many such incidents keep happening regularly. So being aware of these methods could be helpful for your prelims or maybe even for mains. Next, we have an article on page 6 referring to community radio stations. The article refers to how community radio stations can be used for improving palliative care for those who are suffering from life-threatening, terminally ill diseases, especially cancer patients, right? They're terminally ill. It's a life-threatening disease. So such patients who are on their deathbed, they need palliative care. It's a specialized form of medical care and treatment designed to ease the suffering of the person who's on their deathbed. Because those who are terminally ill, they face a lot of challenges, right? They face depression, anxiety, social isolation. They struggle to get the right treatment as well. So in the field of medicine, you have a specialized branch, that is palliative care, which provides empathetic care and treatment for life-threatening terminally ill diseases. So community radio stations in this regard can play a critical role, and one such community radio station, known as Radio Santwanam 90.4 FM, is providing counseling, guidance and assistance to the elderly and the terminally ill patients, which is basically a community service. Now, this article, right, initially it may seem irrelevant for the exam, but trust me, community radios play a key role in development. Alright, so you should know the history of community radio in India and the role of community radio in India. Believe it or not, community radio in India was not legal until recently. What do you mean by a community radio? These radios are not for profit channels, right? You have your regular media channels based on radio, right, which are for-profit entities. You have government-owned radio channels. Apart from that, you have community-owned radio channels, right, which is owned by NGOs, not-for-profit organizations, or by a group of individuals from the civil society. And they're using the radio channels for a social purpose, not for profit. So such social purpose radio channels run by the civil society, run by NGOs with a developmental objective in mind, with a social objective in mind, they are called community radios. These were not legal in India until 2002. Thanks to a landmark ruling of the Supreme Court in 1995, in this case, the Supreme Court declared that using community radio is seen as a fundamental right under Article 19 and also under Universal Declaration of Human Rights, because it's an integral part of your right to free speech and expression. So Supreme Court carried an intervention, pushed the government to bring out a policy to govern community radios and legalize community radios in the country. Is that clear? So the Supreme Court interpreted that air waves, the air spectrum, is a public property and there's nothing wrong in using it for the public good. So if NGOs or civil society or the local community, if they want to run a radio channel to provide education, to provide guidance, counseling, medical assistance, or alerts regarding disasters, or advice regarding agriculture, right? If they want to carry out educational programs, there's nothing wrong with that. It's for the public good. And also it's a part of your fundamental right to free speech and expression. Supreme Court said community radios have to be allowed with reasonable restrictions as per provisions of Article 19. This finally led the then Vajpayee government in 2002 to introduce a policy for community radios, and initially only educational institutions were allowed to maintain community radio stations. By then, the civil society members who wanted to legalize community radio, they had met and they had brought out the Bangalore Declaration and Pastapur Declaration, through which the enthusiastic community had urged the government to bring a policy to legalize community radios and deploy them for social work and public work. So the Vajpayee government was the first to introduce a policy based on this, and licenses were granted, but only for educational institutions like IITs, IIMs, etc. It was meant only for educational content. But later, the coverage was slowly expanded. The civil society kept highlighting the role of community radio in improving life in rural areas, in reaching out to remote regions, hilly areas. Now, for example, farmers and agriculture sector can benefit immensely through such radios. Imagine experts or farmers who have seen a lot of success. They can communicate their strategies, their ideas to other farmers in the region, right? Similarly, let's say there is a disaster hit area. In searching for people, in managing disasters, community radio can play a critical role in providing healthcare advice, in spreading social messages against alcohol consumption, against tobacco usage, against drug addiction, right? Promoting women empowerment or women related issues. All of this can be done by using community radio. And this is where the government started rationalizing the policy. In 2006, there was a major update and the FM band 88 to 108 megahertz was assigned for NGOs and social organizations to apply for a community radio license. Is that clear? So since 2008, not just educational institutions, even NGOs, local community groups and social groups can apply for a community radio license. Today we have a few hundred community radios operating in India, and they are delivering social service and developmental service. So that is the role of community radio, and you should be aware of this. Next article on page 10, it provides an update on the Chandrayaan-3 mission, the Pragyan rover, right? The Chandrayaan-3 mission was supposed to be active for the first 14 days. The lander and the rover module, the Vikram lander and Pragya rover, they were designed primarily to operate in the first 14 days, which is a lunar day. I hope you know that each lunar day is equal to 14 Earth days, and similarly each lunar night is equal to 14 Earth nights. So the Vikram lander and Pragya rover, they depend on solar power to charge their batteries and continue their operations, to operate the payloads. So the initial design of the mission was just for 14 days, where the initial experiments will be conducted. Now the moon is entering the lunar night phase. All right. So it's expected that the Vikram lander and Pragya rover, they will stay shut for some time. And when the next lunar cycle starts, after 14 days, when the next lunar day starts, these modules, the lander and rover modules, are expected to be reactivated. So ISRO has given an update here that Pragya rover has completed all the basic initial experiments. All the data has been relayed as well through the Vikram lander. All the collected data, it has already been relayed to the Earth stations. And now, as the lunar night is about to begin, Pragya rover has been put on sleep mode. ISRO has successfully put Pragya rover and its payloads and the Vikram lander into a sleep mode, and they will remain inactive for the next 2 weeks. Meanwhile, the solar panels have fully charged the batteries, and ISRO has high hope and anticipation that when the next sun rises, these equipment will be reactivated again. But of course, it is subjected to the harsh lunar conditions. It has to survive the extreme cold, the radiation, right? So if it manages to survive, then the equipment will be turned back on after 14 days. So in the image you can see the Shiv Shakti point where the Vikram lander has landed. From here the Pragya rover has traversed a distance of around 100 meters, and this is where the Pragya rover is currently placed. It's been parked in a safe location by ISRO, and then the payload and the module has been put on sleep mode. Is that clear? This is where the rover will remain, and ISRO is very, very hopeful that after 14 days both the equipment can be turned back on, and we hope these equipment to be functioning for a long period of time. But like I said, it will depend on how the equipment will weather the harsh conditions during lunar night. Next, we have an article on page 11 related to Sri Lanka's economic and social status brought out by the UNDP, the UN Development Program. The UN Development Program is a major international organization of the United Nations. So from a prelims point of view, it's very important. According to UNDP, it has studied the social and economic well-being of Sri Lankan people since the beginning of the Sri Lanka's economic crisis. Right? Sri Lanka suffered a massive debt crisis and a foreign exchange crisis, and today its economy has collapsed more or less. The current government under Ranil Wickremesinghe is trying to revive growth, and it's trying to restructure the debt. It is trying to work out a debt restructuring arrangement to revive the economy, and Sri Lanka has already received assistance of $3 billion from the IMF. It has got a bailout package of $3 billion from the IMF. Even countries like India, which are creditor nations to the Sri Lankan government, have given around $4 billion worth of assistance. Right? So Sri Lanka is currently working out this bailout package with IMF, with its crediting countries like India, China, Japan. So Sri Lanka is still way away from recovering. Its economy and its developmental activities, they are way off the mark right now. So this suffering of the last 1.5 to 2 years has had a huge social and economic cost on the people. So UNDP report says that more than half of Sri Lanka's population has become vulnerable. That is with regard to their education, access to education, with regard to access to quality healthcare and their standard of living. This has gone down for more than half of Sri Lankans, and they're fallen into the vulnerable category according to UNDP. So this makes UNDP very important for your prelims. The UN Development Program was established in the year 1965 by merging the UN Expanded Program of Technical Assistance and the UN Special Fund. It was established by the UN General Assembly, and it functions as an expert organization in the field of human development. Its primary focus is human development. It brings out the popular HDI index, the Human Development Index, and the HDI report, which measures development based on 3 indicators, that is access to education, the quality of basic health care, and the standard of living. These are the 3 primary parameters measured by UNDP. So this body is headquartered in New York, and it's part of the UN Sustainable Development Group, which is striving to achieve the Global Sustainable Development Targets by 2030. It's working to reduce poverty, eliminate poverty, make it zero, to achieve zero hunger, and to achieve other health, educational and developmental targets as part of sustainable development goals of the UN. So this body consists of 36 countries that hold the position on a rotating basis. They become part of the executive board, which manage the organization, and it publishes the HDI index and the HDI report. Is that clear? So please make a note of these key points. Next, the 9th article on page number 12 in the Science and Technology page, we have an article related to geography and environment and ecology. This article refers to a phenomena known as the Atlantification of the Arctic Sea. The term can be very, very important for geography and environment and ecology. The term Atlantification of the Arctic is used by climatologists and experts to refer to the warming of the Arctic region due to the entry of warm waters from the Atlantic. There is an abnormal water flow being detected from northern Atlantic Ocean, where warm waters are entering the cold Arctic region, which is altering the stratification of the ocean layers in the Arctic. See, in the ocean as well, right, if you look at it from top to bottom, the water is stratified. Cold water, which is heavier, would have sunk to the bottom. Relatively warmer water is at the top. So there is a certain layer of stratification in the oceans and the seas. In the Arctic, the stratification is such that, right, the cold layers, they protect the ice sheets and the glaciers and the polar ice cap in the North Pole. But now, due to changes that are happening in the oceanic currents, in the sea surface temperature, and also the changes happening in the atmospheric pressure conditions and the wind currents, warm water currents, which are more saline, they are finding a way and entering the Arctic region, the colder Arctic region. There is this flux, this inflow of warm currents happening from the Atlantic, northern Atlantic towards the Arctic, which is accelerating the melting of ice. Is that clear? This phenomena has been particularly noted in the Barents Sea and also in the Scandinavia region near Norway, Finland and Sweden. So according to experts, Arctic dipole is primarily responsible, which is a temperature pressure difference between Atlantic and the Arctic, and the anticyclonic winds in North America and the cyclonic circulation in Eurasia region, they are also influencing the flow of water from North Atlantic towards the Arctic through the Fram Strait. Especially through the Fram Strait, the warm Atlantic waters are entering the Arctic Sea in greater numbers, causing the warming of the water body, which is affecting the ice caps and glaciers, causing accelerated melting. So please be aware of this phenomena called Atlantification and also make a note of the location. Please identify on a map where Fram Strait is located. Identify where Barents Sea is located and what is the Scandinavia region. This is a small exercise for you. Alright, please identify these locations. Now coming to the last article for today. On page 13 from Indian Economy, we have an article referring to anti-dumping duty. According to the article, the Ministry of Commerce in India is looking to impose anti-dumping duty on Chinese glass, which is imported into India, which is used in home appliances. The Commerce Ministry has recommended that anti-dumping duty has to be levied on Chinese glass, which is used for making home appliances in India. Because without this, the Chinese glass is being dumped on the Indian market, which could harm and affect our domestic industry. Our domestic manufacturers who produce the glass needed for home appliances, they are taking a hit because India is convinced that China is dumping the glass material and it's harming our domestic industry. So to counter that, a duty is imposed called anti-dumping duty. So please understand what exactly is anti-dumping duty. Understand the concept here. Anti-dumping duty is levied. It's basically a tax. It's an import tax that is levied on products and services when a foreign seller, if they are deliberately resorting to an unfair practice, if they are resorting to an unfair trade practice, where they are selling the produce, they're selling the product or the service in our market at a lower price than the cost in the national market. That is, the exporter would have deliberately lowered the price to outcompete the domestic players in our market. Now let's say a particular good is being exported from China to India. The same good is produced in India as well. In India, the sellers can sell it at, let's say, 50,000 rupees, right? That is the minimum price they can provide. Given the, if you account for the input cost, right? If you cover all the production cost and then keep a small profit margin, let's say a particular commodity is being sold at 50,000 rupees in India. Now, there could be a Chinese exporter where the same good is produced in China. They might be selling it in China at 60,000 rupees, at the equivalent of 60,000 rupees. But just to dominate the Indian market, to breach and penetrate the Indian market and destroy competition in the Indian market, the Chinese exporter will deliberately price it at 45,000 rupees. Right? Even after exporting it to India, they will sell that at 45,000 rupees lower than the prices here. So as a result, competition gets disrupted. It's an unfair practice where the exporter is trying to capitalize on the market by resorting to such unfair methods. So such unfair pricing, where the price of the product or service is lower, right, than the fair market price, this will have a huge impact on our domestic industries. It will wipe out competition. Our domestic producers will never be able to compete with the cheaper price at which the imported good is being sold. So if such a practice is detected, this will be labeled as dumping of the good. And dumping is prohibited under WTO GATT rules. The World Trade Organization, under the GATT rules, has prohibited dumping as an unfair trade practice, and it allows countries to protect their domestic industry by levying anti-dumping duty. That is, they impose a tax which increases the price of this good which is being dumped on the Indian market, thereby protecting our domestic industry, thereby allowing competition to thrive. So if the prices go up of this cheap imported product, then the product which has better quality, right, that will survive in the market. It will give a chance to our domestic industry to fight and survive. So that is why anti-dumping duty is a key trade measure which is used against the practice of dumping. So this completes my detailed discussion of today's newspaper. Please take up these two questions for your mains answer writing practice. I hope you guys have liked the session. Do let me know in the comments. Do press the like button and don't forget to head to our Telegram channel because we have a quiz on these topics. The link for Telegram channel is also added in the description box below. So on this note, I would like to end the session. Please subscribe to the channel as well, and we'll see you tomorrow at 10 a.m. Till then, take care. Have a great day.